to work with a twin needle or double needle on the Pfaff sewing machine, there's just a couple things to be aware of when you start putting in two needles. So let's start by just adding the new needle. So just take out your single needle and substitute it in with the double needle. Now on this package, I'll show you, it says 2.0 millimeters. So that means the distance between these two needles are 2 millimeters wide. So keep that in mind when we start to adjust our stitches. Next, your threads. I am going to kind of rethread the machine. I'm going to do some maroon thread we've been using and then a variegated thread. Now, if I put this larger spool, for example, up on my secondary spool, this is really heavy to turn. That's going to pull some of my bobbin thread up. So put it on a thread stand, or I'm going to show you a little trick that I do when I don't have a thread stand close by. I'll set the spool right in front of my machine and then just have it come up to that vertical spool pin. I'm just running it around there. Now it's still catching just a little bit on the edge here, but at least it's not trying to spin that whole entire spool as I'm stitching. So the key is to start off with the two threads together, but you're going to notice that right here at the top of the machine, there's a little tiny fin. This fin, I'm going to position one thread, I'm separating them, one thread on one side, one thread on the other. And as they go down through there, the tension area, I'm going to give them a little tug and a little floss, but then they're going to go through the rest of the machine like normal, each of the guides, but keeping in mind that my needle threader does not work once I'm down at the base here. So I will need to manually thread these needles. It doesn't matter if which thread goes in which needle. So we'll just pick one. That one's going on the right needle and this one's going on the left. Now remember the size we mentioned at the beginning. This was a 2.0 double needle. Now the Pfaff Ambition Essential sewing machine has a maximum stitch width of 7 millimeters, and that's very important. So because often we use this not just with straight stitch, but some of the decorative stitches up here. So for example, I've picked stitch number 7. It comes up as stitch width of 6. It will go as wide as 7. So when your stitches come up in those wider amounts, you need to do a small subtraction problem. So you take your width that the machine will do, 7, minus the size of the double needle, 2, and that is what you need to reduce it down to. So I need to make sure that I am 5 millimeters or less in stitch width. I'm going to just go down to 4. And you might even first stitch with a straight stitch, but usually I'll just kind of hand turn myself through the first couple stitches, make sure things are sounding okay, I'm threaded okay. And when you start stitching these out, I think you're going to be totally amazed at what one stitch looked like just normal settings and what it looks like now with double needle settings. Now just because you pick another stitch, let's just for fun, I don't want to pick stitches that are too thick. You can sometimes run into some other issues. Let's go to patterns and do 36. Now, before I sew, I must reduce that width. Sometimes if you sew at that wider width, it's going to break the needle. So 7 minus 2 equals 5. And if again, you want to be a little safer, you can always go just one touch further for 4.5. And then go ahead and let's sew out. Oh yeah, this one's almost like a little, it's not a serpentine stitch, but it has a little kind of fun twist to it. You kind of hear I'm sewing a little slower when I start off and then getting more confident as I go, just making sure everything's where it should be. And how about let's just go back to a regular straight stitch. This will have the needle in the center needle position, no swinging back and forth, so I'm not too worried. And we'll finish off with a straight stitch. Okay, so let's take a look at what we are experiencing. Yes, we did have some variegated thread on here. So as you can see, we have a really pretty stitch that has kind of a two-toned in it. That honeycomb stitch looks totally different than just a single thread. Here's that kind of serpentine stitch with a little bit extra wave. That was stitch number 36 and then finished off with a straight stitch. So you can free motion quilt with a twin needle. You can do decorative stitches as long as you remember to reduce the stitch width. Just kind of always test. You can put the threads in different places, separating it out with the tension, one on one side, one on the other, and you are good to go by stitching out all the rest of your decorative stitches again with the twin needle, because now you have even more stitches to play with.